If you've ever flipped over a rock, mulch, or compost in the garden and seen something creepy crawling under it and wondered to yourself, is that beneficial or bad? Then this video is for you. And that's because the reality is most pests aren't actually pests. Rather, they are messengers of some sort of information. Now, today's video is completely based off of your guys' needs and wants. And Ella, my channel manager, is here today. We'll see how long this lasts. If she gets a little bit rowdy, she might have to go into a different room again like she usually does. But you guys ask the questions, I make the videos, and one question was asked about roly-poly bugs. This was asked by Roaring Rage, and the question was, are these beneficial or bad? Because I see them in my garden all the time, which got me to thinking about how we should talk about those bugs, but how we should also talk about the other various different forms of bugs you can find, whether or not they're beneficial, and what the bad ones may be a sign or a symptom of, and how you can correct it. And that's because if you threaten the messenger rather than treating the message, then you're probably setting yourself up for worse off conditions. So let's start off with the first one that Roaring Rage asked us about, and that was the roly-poly pug. Why can I not say this? The roly-polies, aka the pillbugs. These guys actually, interestingly enough, are not bugs. They're crustaceans. They're way closer related to a shrimp than they are to a bug. They are decomposers, similar to like what a worm is. They shred the material up into smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces can then be dealt with by microbes on a microbial level to then cycle that nutrient further for your plants, in this case, to uptake. Now, they're beneficial for the most part, as long as their food source is high. So the moment you get a lot of roly-polies or pillbugs without the presence of carbon or organic material, we end up with a situation where we have a population of crustaceans on land that are now starving. And therefore, they start going after other things, such as seedlings. To prevent this from happening without killing off of your crustaceans and actually helping them to continue to decompose and do their job without harming your seeds or your seedlings that you've recently planted, is you simply want to either reduce the moisture that is in and around the seed or the seedling, which is less than ideal. But most certainly, you want to remove shelter. So the shelter can come in the form of usually mulch. So if we're able to pull this back, if we're able to pull back leaves, plant debris, compost that's been top dressed onto the surface, anything like that, we pull it back away, then it allows for basically a little bit of breathing room between the pill bugs and the seeds. Next one I've done an entire video on, and that is ants. And that's because these ones are probably the most understood. There's two kind of categories you would fall into. First category is ants are bad and they need to go. Second category is ants are good and why would you kill them off? Because I've done an entire video on this, I'm not going to go into too much details, but I will give you kind of the Coles notes when it comes to ants. So ants are kind of a double-edged sword, if you will. Yes, they benefit you. The rumors of them aerating soil, very real, very true. They do move nutrients, so they will move organic material in farther into the soil profile or at a very minimum around the soil profile, just via transport. And in turn, they do increase microbial activity due to the aeration and the redistribution of nutrients. Makes sense, right? Where they become a problem is they actually also protect, harvest, and farm, which I was joking, I'm dead serious, they're this smart, sap-sucking bugs. So this can include things like mealybugs, aphids, scale, you name it. Anything that produces that honeydew, that sticky substance, it is a pest. They farm it, they use it. Also, because they increase microbial activity through aeration and redistribution of nutrients, we can end up with plants that have excessive levels of nitrogen as well. Again, causing more aphid pressure, greater levels of stress induced via drought and heat and that sort of thing. So double-edged sword there. There's a number of different ways to take care of ants, most of which are organic and very natural. These things include actually using just other predatory bugs that you can buy to help eliminate them. So I'm going to actually reference you to that other video because that's where a bulk of the information is going to be. If you have ants and you're debating whether or not, you need to kind of do a little bit of a culling, if you will, of those ant colonies. Next up is earwigs. So earwigs get blamed for everything, in particular holes in leaves. But here's a fun fact. Earwigs are not plant eaters solely. They also eat other insects. So they're actually omnivores, not herbivores. So what they do chew on is algae, dead plant material, and then other insects. They are part of the nighttime cleanup crew that you don't see unless you're outside in the garden in the dead of night. And what they do at night is they will go through and they will clean up other insects. Now, if their food source is scarce, aka if other insects are not present, their natural food source is not present, and their populations have rose due to a time in which there was excessive levels of insects, such as the year prior. If you had a really bad year for insects, you will have a big earwig spike. And therefore, the next year, you may not have the population of pests to keep these guys fed. So therefore, they will start going after not just dead plant material, but living plant material as well. Now, what they go for most is tender leaves. So leaves of plants that are either very young or leaves of plants that have excessive levels of nitrogen. They will often go for flower petals because those are very soft and supple. And then they will also go for fruits. So one of the best ways to deal with an earwig issue, preferably, would be to leave them in order to see if there is a population to sustain the earwig population you have. So they can eliminate things like the aphids and the mealybugs and the thrips and that sort of thing. If you notice that the earwigs are actually doing damage to the plants and it's time to intervene, then step 2 would be to ensure you are pruning properly and removing what I like to call the bug highways, which are essentially areas within your garden where plant leaves of different plants are touching each other, allowing for things like earwigs to very easily crawl over. Step number 2 is removing any sort of plant material, mulch material, debris away from the base of the plant, just like you would any sort of mulching situation. Things get moved around when you weed. Things get, if you're just being sloppy when you initially applied it, wind, rain, just regular watering will all move mulch around. So we just want to check and make sure everything's pulled away from that base. And those 2 things alone should be enough to help keep that earwig population at bay without you intervening. But again, you only want to intervene when you begin to see signs that the earwig population cannot be sustained by the number of other problem insects you have. Okay, so here's everyone's favorite, slugs and snails. Now, slugs and snails, first and foremost, are decomposers before they are plant eaters. Their preference is to decompose plant material over eating the new stuff. Where they thrive is somewhere similar to what we see with those pillbugs. It is in areas that are overwatered with excessive levels of moisture, dense mulch, and places with lower airflow. They like to go for seedlings, leafy greens, and plants that are stressed out via excessive levels of nitrogen, drought, etc., and so forth. So I think it's safe to say that when we have excessive levels of slugs and snails, it is a sign of moisture imbalance in particular. Now, this can come from many different shapes, forms, and sizes. First of all, it can come from you watering too much. Maybe you've got your watering system on a timer and you automatically water every single night for 15 minutes. That may be the problem, particularly if you have rain during the day. You also have instances where you just have luck of the draw. Some years are really bad years for moisture, and therefore there's not much you can do about it. But to help treat that imbalance we're seeing, we can play Mother Nature to an extent and actually do things like pull back or remove mulch. Rather than piling more mulch on in a wet season, we may choose to reduce that or ensure that there's less of it. Another thing we could do if we don't want soil erosion due to water movement across the soil surface, wind movement across the soil surface, etc., and so forth, we could go for a chunkier mulch rather than something that's thinner. So rather than using things like peat moss, coconut coir, grass clippings, shredded leaves for a mulch, what we may choose to do is something like a straw or a bark, for example, in the years where we're noticing excessive levels of moisture and we need to kind of get a little bit of a balance in place where otherwise it's not present. Next category is actually spiders. Now, spiders are never an indicator of anything bad. They never prey on plants, and their webs should never cause any sort of issue with leaves, stems, etc., and so forth in a volume or presence that is damaging to the photosynthesis or the growth of the plant. It's very rare that that would happen. And so therefore we actually never want to get rid of spiders unless, of course, you have spider mites, which are two very different things. But spider mites do make spider webs. So spider mites are an indicator of dry conditions, excessively dry conditions. They are commonly seen in instances of drought. They're commonly seen in areas or on crops that we normally don't water every single day. For example, things like tomatoes and peppers. One of the best ways to reverse these guys and their damage, because they will cause a substantial amount of damage to leaves, is actually through moisture. So the cure is quite literally watering, and more particular is watering the leaves themselves, causing kind of like a humidity sink in and around the canopy that is your garden. So despite popular belief, misting plants in a house setting, for example, like the house plants behind me, may not permanently increase humidity. But when we're talking about an outdoor scenario, your garden is similar to a rainforest, but on a miniature scale. So if you've ever watered your garden, particularly a garden that is near a lawn with mulch, and you've allowed that water to hit the stem of the plant, the leaves, the mulch, the ground, the entire area, it is a known fact that when you go to walk into that space, it will feel more humid right there. You can feel this in areas near water, but again, your garden is like a little microclimate. And so while this microclimate can't be kept humid 24/7, it can be kept humid for a larger bulk of time and therefore help to reduce those spider mites pretty darn easily. There are other ways to get rid of spider mites. You could get predatory mites if you wanted to. If it is an indoor scenario, I would go for the predatory mites preferably. And those you can just grab off Amazon. There's a Canadian company that sells them. They work wonderful for putting in an indoor setting. You can't see them. They also look like spiders, but they're a different kind of spider, a good guy, if you will. And they will take out any sort of spider mite issues you may have. So this one is a pest that I'm hearing about more and more often. And that is because we have been in a little bit of a drought season here in North America. And that is the grasshopper. And this is because grasshoppers come around when there is warm, dry springs, when there are vast swaths of land that are absent of vegetation. So if you've got a lot of summer fallows fields, for example, in Canada, we currently have or had a large tariff on our canola. There was a small risk that farmers would summer fallow more land this year than they would otherwise, because the cash crop that a lot of farmers make a ton of money off of, which is canola, is not worth that much. Crops in general are worth less currently in this economic situation, so they're less likely to put inputs into a crop. And all of these things over time amplify for larger grasshopper populations. So here's a very realistic look at what it's going to take to keep a grasshopper population under control in an area where you're having grasshopper issues. Because grasshoppers can and will feed off of your garden, and they will strip a garden entirely bare. And I know people in the Geek Crew actually experienced this last year, quite severe in some cases. If you have the ability to, ensure that your roadside ditches or any sort of land near you is not mowed. They do really well in freshly mowed grass and ditch areas. If those areas contain a lot of grass vegetation, native or not native, it will help reduce that grasshopper pressure on your ornamental or vegetative plants that you have at home. They also love to lay their eggs in soil. So this is soil that is completely bare, meaning it doesn't have any sort of mulch on the top, and it is undisturbed. So this could be transition points between a lawn and a sidewalk or a road. This could be, in some instances, larger gardens where you've planted everything and then you don't mulch it in any capacity. So one of your best allies is to actually mulch bare soil or to cover bare soil in some way, whether it's with a cover crop, again, mulch, plastic, whatever the case is. Bare soil and short lack of foliage are the two things we want to stay away from. Unfortunately, outside of that, the control of these is very difficult unless you're willing to use insecticides. And as someone personally who's worked in the world of agriculture and has done research on pesticides, insecticides are included in that category, I would heavily encourage you not to. And that's coming from someone who quite often will tell you glyphosate's a cakewalk. To me, from everything I've seen, gardening with it, particularly the stuff you get from like a home garden show center, it's not going to do much. But insecticides are very different beast. And I would actually stay away from them entirely and use as many organic methods as possible to help eliminate pest pressure in the form of insects before I would touch any sort of spray. And that is because a lot of them are neurological based and they will neurologically also mess you up. So just saying. Anyways, Geek Crew, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not yet and leave your questions down below. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.